You're listening to The Real Deal Conversations, a podcast designed to encourage, inspire, and equip you by sharing real stories and meaningful conversations that bring real life to the surface. I'm your host, Megan Deal. Let's dive in. Today, I have the honor of hosting a remarkable guest, Grand Ole Opry veteran Darryl Mosley, whose talent in storytelling through music has earned him comparisons to literary greats like Raymond Carver and Norman Rockwell. His relaxed conversational singing style is often likened to legends such as Don Williams, Guy Clark, and John Denver. And Darryl's music paints vivid pictures of small-town life, rural churches, and the hardworking people who inhabit them. Throughout his career, Darryl has achieved numerous accolades, including 3 Songwriter of the Year awards, 13 number 1 songs, and 3 Song of the Year honors. Recently, he has completed his first ever book titled A Life Well Lived. And so today we're going to talk about things that encompass a life well lived for Darryl Mosley as we lead up to talking the release of his first book, A Life Well Lived. Darryl, thanks for coming on.
Megan, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes. So Darryl, when you were younger, so you've had a career in music for over 30 years, but when you were younger, was your family in music?
Not really. I mean, of course, in the South, there's lots of musicians and lots of front porch players and that sort of thing. My mom played guitar a little bit and sang at church mostly. And so when I first started trying to learn to sing, I was singing with her at church and she kind of got me started playing guitar, the first 2 or 3 chords. And, so there was music around. It was, it was always looked at as strictly, a hobby, strictly as fun. There was, not professional, which was, from the time I learned to sing and play a little, I knew that I wanted to do it as a life work.
So what inspired you, and was it just picking up the guitar and your love for that and singing, or was there something that very specifically inspired you and made you know that's what you wanted to do?
I can't remember ever there being a time when I didn't listen to songs and try to figure out what the writer or the artist was trying to teach me. One of the very first albums, of course, it was a cassette way back in the day, that I bought was Billy Joel's 52nd Street album. And of course, Billy Joel wrote from his perspective of a kid growing up in, Long Island, and which was, might as well have been the moon compared to where I lived, But I felt like I understood him and I could relate to some of the experiences. And I felt like I had a better understanding of that life because of that. And I knew fairly early on, I wanted to be able to do that too. I wanted to be able to write and reach an audience and have them feel something, because I really believe it's all about feeling something.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I love that. There was something I had read, I think it was in your bio, challenges and overcoming challenges. Like those are your people who are relatable. I forgot the specific wording, but even in your music, there is something that speaks to the audience. There is something that connects them, and there's a feeling of community. There's that Walking Man. I had that on repeat a few days in the last week. I travel a lot, and I can listen to that song all day. I mean, there is something about it that feels, I don't know if it's the way you paint it or the way you sing it, but it feels so inspiring. Like that's who we should be as people, like that man that you're speaking about.
Well, that means so much to me, Megan, because that was truly the point. I tell this on stage a lot, but the man that inspired that song was a Mr. John L. Mays. And he was a black man in our community who was severely autistic and spent his life walking, and he would walk to the hospital and the nursing home and the funeral home and always visiting with people. And, and of course, when he passed away, to this day, if you find his gravestone, it says at the top, it says the Walking Man, because there were people who maybe didn't know his name, but they recognized him because he was always the one that was walking. And I thought, if I'm going to call myself a Christian, if I'm going to claim that I'm on this Christian walk, then that's what I want. I want people who don't know me still be able to recognize that I'm a walking man. And so that's the whole essence of living a Christian life in a fairly non-Christian world. It's not offensive. It's not abrasive. It's just active.
I would go, after you listen to this, go listen to Walking Man, and you will understand why it was on repeat in my car. It really is a very inspiring, it's how we should be. Yes. Go listen to that, please. How old were you when you first started to make the steps into music?
When I was about 15 or 16, where I live is about 5 miles from where Miss Loretta Lynn lives. So I knew Miss Loretta and her family pretty well. And she has, or had back then, a lot more active, even like a tourist ranch out at her place. And so you could, you go out there on camp and on vacation, and you could swim and you could ride horses and, lots of activities. And so when I was about 15, they hired me to do what they called the campfire show. And it was a little small stage on this side of a hill. And so every night I would do about an hour and a half concert for these families that would come in and camp for 2 or 3 days, and then they would leave and new families would come in. And so I spent all summer long on stage learning how to reach an audience. And, you talk about learning by doing, I look back on some of the things I thought were a good idea then and thought, well, I wish I had thought better of that. But it was a great opportunity to learn. And so once I kind of got the taste of singing live and feeling that connection with an audience, I never really looked back beyond that.
Was it terrifying at first?
I was never really nervous. I was always really excited. There have been a few times in life that I was nervous. My first time on the Opry, places like that, that are super revered. I didn't have sense enough to be nervous back then. I should have been. But, I was just excited at the opportunity. And it was great because, all these years later, occasionally I would run into Miss Loretta at the Opry, and it was just I owe her so much, and the encouragement and the opportunity she gave me.
When you were starting out, it sounds like that was part of your support system, but what did your support system look like as a whole? Did you have a big support system? Were you kind of navigating it on your own? What did that look like? No,
I was pretty much on my own. My mom was scared to death that I was going to pursue music as a career. That was not
really.
Yeah, because being a typical mom, she'd heard terrible things about the music industry, and she was worried I was going to end up singing in some joint, and that sort of thing. And so she was less than supportive. I can say that now, but I was really not deterred. It would be so much easier now because you have the internet and access to so much more information. But I was reading every book, buying every book I could find about how the music industry worked and who does what, and reading all the liner notes of all the records to find out who these people are. And, it was this hunger for the information, and you had to go find it because it wasn't certainly not coming to me. And I didn't, other than Miss Loretta, who was on the road all the time, I didn't know anybody else who was in professional music. It was a grassroots effort from the very beginning.
Yeah, I think that's awesome and really encouraging for people who are starting out on their music journey and are starting from scratch with the support of just them, or maybe just them and their spouse. I think that's extremely encouraging to see where you're at today, and knowing that it wasn't handed to you, it wasn't passed on to you. You can be a self-starter and see wonderful fruits of that. I think that's awesome.
Oh yeah. Honestly, learning it the way I did has paid off in many, many ways over the years, because I've been able to understand, when this doesn't make sense, I think I'm being taken advantage of. If I do this, this looks like a really good opportunity. You're better able to discern what makes sense when you understand how it works. And I think that's true in any industry. If you were going to pursue a career in the theater and you were going to move to New York, well, I think the first thing you should do before you move is learn everything you can about who's there and why are they there and what do they do while they're there and how the industry actually works, because you will save yourself a ton of grief later on.
While you were doing that, while you were learning all that, what are some hiccups or bumps in the road that you experienced that you had to overcome? Like, what are some challenges that you had to learn the hard way in all of that? Yeah.
You have to be a really good judge of yourself and reality. And when you're young, you're not good at that. You come in the room thinking you're one of the best, but if you look around, you realize that you're one of the rest. Everybody in this room is good. And that's why they're in the room. And, I've heard guys who, were playing college baseball. And I saw when somebody was asked, are you the best player on your team? They said, we were all the best player on our team, but now we're just one of the players. Well, it's that way anytime you're moving up the ranks in anything. And so that was, you have to learn to be able to judge yourself and accept that it's not going to be handed to you, accept that it's not always going to be fair, that there's always going to be things like nepotism and things. It's, there are unconscious biases that people are going to have, and you're just going to have to deal with that because that's just the way life is. But it's like anything else. You can't just have one failure and say, well, this is not for me, or, God must not be in this. No, I mean, I would just try another door and another door, and eventually doors started opening.
So when you were trying other doors, how long did some of those seasons last? Just so that somebody who's listening and getting started goes, well, my doors have been getting shut for a year. So what would you say to them if they're like, well, I feel like there's no timestamp on that. I feel like you keep pushing through, but what would you say to them?
I 100% agree, because timing is everything. And, and it could be that whatever it is, whatever the product that you offer or that you are, you may be fabulous at it, but the timing is wrong. You may be 5 years too early. So if you give up 2 years in, they're never going to know it, And so you have to keep believing in that you have something to offer. And so, when I finished, high school, I mean, I had a job, I was, paying my bills like everybody else, but I never stopped trying, pursuing music. And so by the time that I was, and this went on for years, trying different approaches and contacting record labels and publishing companies and getting turned down. But ultimately ended up putting a little band together. This would have been like in 1987, I guess. And we entered a little band contest. I guess it was a national band contest. We were rehearsing in the hallway of this hotel. And just by chance, an A&R guy from a record label was standing there. And that's how we ended up getting the first record. If we had, but we had to keep pushing and keep rehearsing and keep trying to be, it's the old thing that, it's when, when opportunity meets preparation. If we had not been prepared, we wouldn't have got the opportunity. We had to go to the record label, audition in front of the whole staff. But at that point, we were ready because we practiced a lot. We rehearsed a lot. So it worked out. But if it would have been really easy in the years prior to that to get discouraged. But I was never really deterred. There was always a place in my heart that really believed that one way or the other, this is going to work out, that this was my path. I've always believed that.
I love that. And I think God gives us, what I love about God is he gives us full circle moments. When it takes so much time to finally get to the place that you wanted to get, I feel like he gives us those full circle moments to say, I saw you back then too. It just took some time. It needed to be on my timing. And it's like those little winks to be like, oh, you were in that the whole time.
I've often said that, that walking with the Lord is a lot like putting together a jigsaw puzzle, and he's got the box top.
Yeah.
And sometimes all you get is this little piece and it doesn't even have an edge to it. And you're not even sure which way to turn. It doesn't make any sense. But if you're patient enough and you start stringing enough of those pieces together, then the picture that was on that box top starts showing. Then it starts coming clear to you. You just have to have enough faith that I'm just going to keep putting these pieces together and know that the picture that he's trying to paint with my life is going to come out.
Yes. Oh, so true. So good. So when writing, your songs, albums, what is the creative process behind that? So how do you get in that headspace? Is a lot of it just organic? Do you go out to a certain area that is your place for creativity? What does that creative process look like?
I guess it's different with everybody. When I started trying to learn how to write songs, it's like anything else. There's part of its gift and part of its craft, and I'm grateful that God gave me the gift. But like with lots of things in ministry, the craft part, he leaves that up to you. It's how much are you willing to invest in this? And so I, started trying to learn how to do this, how to build a song. And one of the things that I learned, and I was blessed that I had a kind of a mentor, a guy, and Larry Shell, who'd written a bunch of country songs and hits, and he would let me kind of show up at his office and just sit down and play whatever I'd been working on, and he would tell me what worked and what didn't, and most of it didn't, but it was great feedback. But one of the things he taught me was to kind of keep this radar up, listening for things in conversation or on television or whatever that sounds like that should be a song. So something about what was said that kind of sticks with you. And so over the years, it's almost subconscious, is that, now that I'll hear something in conversation or I'll read something and I'll jot it down. And I keep a running list, of just thoughts and possible song titles and possible lines. And so then when I do get time to sit down and actually write, I've got this to pull from to start kind of, piecing those things together.
Yeah. And your music is very soothing. It's very relaxing. When I listen to it, it makes me want to go move into the country immediately. I'm like, man, can we just forget this busy life and just go relax? That's what your music makes me want to do. It's wonderful.
Well, I appreciate that. The number one musical influence I guess I ever had as far as listening to somebody else was Don Williams. And Don was a big country star back in the 70s and 80s, but, different voice from me, much lower baritone. But Don has this really soothing, laid back and conversational almost in his tone. And it just always seemed like it got a little deeper into my psyche than other people did. And so anytime anybody tells me that my music, my singing does that for them, that's a huge compliment to me. Thank you.
Oh, it does. I live in a neighborhood and I'm like, gosh, man, I'm very busy. I do all the things. I'm mom, wife. I have all the things, right? And then when I listen to your music, it really does. What's interesting about it is it really does take you somewhere else where not all music has the ability. It's not just soothing and relaxing. It has the ability to soothe, relax, and take you into another mindset of. It's very interesting. I mean, I really have like high regards for your music and what it is able to do for the listeners to it.
Well, I appreciate that. I always hope that a listener will either relate to the person in the song or find themselves in the song. Yeah. And so that's always kind of the target. Yeah. Is it will take you someplace, to where you kind of see yourself in that moment. And so that's always what I'm shooting for. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And when coming up and starting your career, because you're a family, I mean, you have kids, right? Mm-hmm. So when you do your career and you're coming and you're doing everything that it takes to start your career, and then you're doing everything, traveling and the recording. So how did you balance that and your personal life? How did you balance family and doing what it took to get where you wanted to be? Well,
it's one of those God things that, could not have been worked out any other way. When I first started on the road or started touring, I was married, but 10 years later, we had 3 children. And I'll never forget my oldest was, I don't know, he was probably 6 or 7. And I'm in Texas, I'm on the road, and I'm on the phone with him trying to explain how you put on the stockings part of a baseball uniform, and it goes over your white socks. And then and I thought that day, I can't do this. I can't be here and miss that. So shortly thereafter, I told the band that I was leaving the band and I was coming home. And, a part of me, was really sad about it. But at the same time, being there for the family, for the kids was so important. And so I wanted to do that. So I quit, took a job, expecting that that might be the end of my music career. But just a month or so after that, I got a call from the Grand Ole Opry. And Bobby and Sonny Osborne, who were legends and members of the opera, were looking for somebody who could play bass and sing harmony. And this was like on a Saturday night. So I drove up to Sonny's house. I'd met them, but I didn't know them. And we rehearsed for about, I don't know, half an hour. And I didn't really know that much of their material. And Sonny said, well, go learn some songs. Not go learn these songs. Here's some CDs. He just said, go learn. So I stopped by the record store on the way home, bought every Osborne Brothers CD they had, and I spent the next week learning all the words and learning the bass part. The following Friday, we got back together and rehearsed again for about an hour, and Sonny said, "You'll do." And I stayed with him for 10 years. Played the Grand Ole Opry that night.
Wow. That's incredible.
Well, it worked out great because I was then able to go to the Opry and play the Opry on Friday nights and Saturday nights and be around all these people that meant so much to me and learn and still be home through the week. It worked out incredibly.
That's amazing. You know what that's a testament to? That what I heard and what you just said was when you do the thing that's really hard, because that had to have been a very hard decision. When you do the thing that's hard and you think, what next? God blesses the hard decision. Like when you make the right decision.
Yeah.
God blesses. I mean, that's exactly what just happened. Like you made the hard decision.
I don't know if it's true with everybody, but my experience lots of times with the Lord is that he requires me to make the first step. He requires me to step into the arena first, to show that I am willing to show my faith, whatever. But once I do that, then he'll step in and then things start to happen. But if I stay on the outside, stay on the fringe, I think he would too.
Oh, yes. And you know how many times biblically in stories when the people in the Bible had to face a really hard thing, God didn't show up until they took the step into it.
Right.
He saved them every time, but they had to step into the really hard thing. You're so right. That is amazing. I love that. That is such a good testament. I love stories like that.
Sure.
So how much of your music is inspired by your personal life? And then how much is inspired by the people and places, like you had mentioned, like when you hear something, jot it down. So how much is inspired by personal life and how much is inspired by what's around you?
There's a lot of overlap in that. I don't write a lot of songs that I would consider autobiographical. There have been a few, but not a lot. But lots of songs that are written about the area that I live in. Some that are obviously very, very clear that's what I'm writing about, but that are just about people that I know or experiences that they've had or things that I've heard. More than anything else, I just try to write a really positive slant on it. We have a tendency in music to think that everything has to be categorized. It's like gospel music, it goes over here, and secular music, it goes over here. Well, that's not how we live. Our faith comes into our personal life, and our personal life comes into our faith life. And so it all comes together. So what I try to write is even, some songs are very directly, gospel songs, but the ones that are not are certainly something that I could still sing in church because you can feel the faith and the values and all that in the lives of these people. And it's just really important for me as a writer to represent that.
So because you have, like you had mentioned, you have been in bands, you've obviously now you're solo. So when you worked with people in the band, how did you navigate? I'm curious, how did you navigate? Because you're always together, right? Like you're always together, you're in those spaces. How did you navigate creative differences? And then how did you come to compromise in those?
Yeah, that's always a challenge, In the first band I was in, all through the 90s, there were four of us. We were all equal partners. Well, the problem with that is that, you can have a 2-2 tie and there's no tiebreaker, and so somehow things just seemed to work out. It just seemed like we would end up coming to some kind of decision, Some members come and go a little bit because bands, that's just the nature of bands. But, the last band I was in, I was in there with one other guy. He was, a partner. And towards the end, the creative differences were pretty significant. He was not a songwriter. Songs didn't mean that much to him. A song was a song as far as he was concerned. Songs mean everything to me. It's to me, it's all about the song. And so at that point, that was kind of when I knew it was time for me to step out of that and to just focus on this, because I knew that for me, I was never going to be satisfied unless I felt like I was putting out the best possible songs, and it worked. Fortunately, worked out really well. I left the band in September of 2019. Immediately signed a record deal and started recording. And just as the first record was finished, COVID hit. But of course that shut down everybody. All the touring, everything shut down. But I had an album that was coming out. So I had all kinds of press. There were people writing about me because they had nobody else to talk about.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things where I just felt the Lord nudging at this time, because he knew COVID was coming and we didn't, and it could not have worked out better.
So everything that we're talking about, I mean, really, a Grand Ole Opry veteran, you sang at the Bluebird Cafe. I mean, you have so many notable achievements, awards and music legends. Bill Gaither has, acclaimed you. You really have a life well lived. But in that, you are so humble. We have a mutual friend. So I know there is, I'm not just saying from like our conversation, I'm saying like you really do seem like a genuine, down to earth person. And so in everything that you've done and all the success you've had and all the places you've performed and the people that have praised you, how have you been able to stay so down to earth? Well,
I appreciate you saying that. I think I'm just fully aware that, that I'm nowhere near the most talented person I know, and that, God has given me some really amazing opportunities that I didn't deserve. I just didn't. And so I'm just grateful, that I've had those opportunities. And so I would never take that for granted. I would never, pat myself on the back and say, look what I did, because none of this stuff should have happened the way it did. And, I'm just continued. I'm as surprised as anybody when good things happen. Right now, as we're doing this, my album is in its third week at number one. The single's in its fourth week at number one, and I don't understand any of that. I'm grateful, but so when you can't really take the credit for it, it's pretty easy to stay well rooted. I'm just grateful.
Yeah, no, that's good. And, having a life well lived and your album, A Life Well Lived, leads up to your latest accomplishment, which is your first book that you have written.
Yeah.
A Life Well Lived, which I believe mine should be. It is so fresh. It just released last week.
Yes.
And my book hasn't even arrived because it is that fresh. So this is extremely exciting. And with A Life Well Lived, we've just talked about the things that have encompassed you. Obviously, not all of it, but there are things that we have chatted about that have led up to you understanding what a life well lived is. So let's talk about the book. So what inspired you to move into author?
A couple of different things. One is the music industry is changing rapidly. There was a time when, as technology comes in and changes the product, they would replace it with another product. And so we went from back in the day from albums to 8 tracks to cassettes to CDs. Well, now it's just invisible. It's in the cloud. People are streaming everything from their phones. And so, people come into a concert and they want to take something home. They want to take a part of that with them. And, I still offer CDs, but they sell less and less because people don't have a way to play them now. And so I thought, well, if I could write a devotional book. And so what I did, I set out the task to write 365 devotionals, each one of them in some way tied to one of the songs, either from a line or a word or one of the songs I'd written over the years. Honestly, Megan, if I had realized the size of the task I was taking on, I might have second guessed it. But
yeah.
But once I got in it, and it was months in the making, but it turned out really well. I'm real proud of it.
And was your intention to tie those devotions to the songs, or did that just kind of happen organically as you were doing it?
No, that was kind of the intention, because I knew that, by and large, they would probably be sold at the concerts and people seem, they obviously have some connection with the songs. They relate to the songs. And so it was something that I could offer that they could take home with them that would allow them to kind of have more of that. I tell a lot of stories in the concerts. CDs and things don't really offer that. The book offers an opportunity to do that. So yeah, it was just one of those things that just kind of came together.
So as the readers are going through the devotional, what do you want them to glean from it? Is it more encouragement? Is it what's your goal for us as we navigate and read that book?
Yeah, it really is just encouragement more than anything else. I mean, it's not real heavy preachy. It's not real deep theological. In fact, I even mentioned in the introduction that I'm not a biblical scholar. I'm a student like everybody else, but I think all of us can use encouragement and little gentle reminders of the goodness and the right things to do and the right way to look at things. And so they're easy to read. They're not very long, but it's just a positive way of looking at it.
Yes. Especially, I think more and more in the world we live in, people desperately need encouragement and hope and something we are a very hurting world. We are a very hurting nation. And that's honestly one of the things I appreciate about your music as well is it sees everybody. There is nothing about your music that isolates a single person or journey, or anybody can be seen in your music. And I appreciate that. And I'm excited to read the devotional because of that.
That means a lot. I believe that it is by design, you think about it. God in his infinite wisdom had the ability to create us in any way he wanted to. He chose to make all of us one-offs, all of us. I mean, even if you're an identical twin, you're still a God original down to your DNA. We don't look alike. We don't think alike. We don't process the same way. We have different gifts and talents and skills and abilities and personalities and interests. And I believe that's by design because I believe he is a personal savior. So his relationship with you is going to be different than his relationship with me. So for me to say, doggone it, you've got to do it my way. You've got to see it my way. How arrogant is that of me? Because I didn't make you. He did. He understands your wiring. I don't. So I'm never going to be that guy that points and says, I've got this all figured out. How arrogant would I have to be that? So I just figured your relationship with him is between you and him. And so if I can say things that are encouraging and uplifting that might cause you to think things differently and brings that relationship closer or develops it in a certain way, then that's really all I'm after. I'm not trying to get anybody to think like I think. I think we have way too much of that.
Oh, amen, Daryl. Amen. So when you were writing it, what did you learn while writing it? What personal growth happened while writing this?
Did I need to study more? Because you can do the research, and do them, a verse at a time or whatever you're working on. And, you can Google search it and here's things but I need to be a better student as far as just consistently reading my Bible. It's real easy to say I'm going to do it and put it off. It's real easy to move that down on the list of priorities. But being in the scripture as much as I was during the writing this, I remembered how much I learn when I do it, how much closer I feel to the Lord when I'm in it, and so that's probably the number one takeaway is that like everybody else, I need to spend more time with him.
And so with writing this, it's a 400-page and it's the first time, it's your first book. What did the moments look like where, if you even did, thought, ooh, this is a lot. This is new. How did you push yourself through that to see the end of this book?
Well, there were definitely moments like that. When I first started getting started, I remember when I had written about 25 of them. And I'm thinking how long this took. And I'm thinking, okay, so I've got 300 and, so left. And I thought, I don't know that I can do this. But then I kept thinking, you know what? I can do them 10 at a time. I mean, it's the old adage, how do you eat an elephant? A bite at a time. That's what I did. And so it was, okay, I'm going to do 10 today. I'm going to do 10 this weekend, and give, if I can get 10 in, then I'll feel good about it. And it just, over time, they piled up. I just had to quit looking at the 365 number and just focus on getting a few of them at a time.
That's good. That's so good. So the book, where is it available for people to purchase?
Right now, Amazon and my website is just darrylmosley.com.
And to wrap up, I am so excited to get this book, especially after talking with you. I think it's always, the more you know about somebody, the more, in the book writing process, the more exciting it is to dive in and see like a different side to the book. And now I'm even more excited to get it in the mail. So Daryl, is there anything that you would like to encourage as we end? Anybody who is starting out in music, whose dream is to be a musician or author, is there anything, nuggets of wisdom or encouragement that you would leave with them?
I would say the number one thing is don't let other people discourage you. Don't let somebody else decide for you how good you are or can be. Don't let somebody else tell you that, the odds are too great. It's not worth the try. I mean, nobody knows the fire that's in your heart but you. And so if it means that much to you, then just ignore the naysayers and keep pushing forward. I truly believe if this is if it's a path God wants for you, then your perseverance will pay off. If it's not, He will lead you into something else where He wants you to be. But it's so much easier to redirect a moving vehicle than it is to push start one. So just start moving forward and then let Him guide it.
That's good. Thank you. And Daryl, I appreciate all of your time. I appreciate you. Honestly, it was an honor to have you on. I am honored that you would say yes. And thank you. Thank you for this conversation.
Oh, it's been a joy. I appreciate you having me.